The silent burial. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of shovels striking earth. The alien village, built from stone and metal, glowed faintly in the cold moonlight. A group of villagers stood in a circle, their shadows stretching long against the ground, their eyes sharp, their voices cold. At the center of the circle was a pit, and in that pit, a young alien woman knelt with her hands bound, her skin shimmered faintly under the pale light, her body trembling not from cold but from shame. She was small, fragile compared to the others, and her glowing eyes reflected terror. The villagers spat at her, calling her useless, broken, cursed. She had no child, no gift to give her people, and in their law, that meant she had no worth. Sterile, one of them hissed, his voice like a whip. She will never give birth, never add to our strength. The soil shall take her back, for she wasted space and air. The girl tried to speak, her voice shaking. I am still alive, I can still serve. But her words were drowned by laughter, cruel and sharp like knives. The leader raised his hand and silence fell again. She is nothing, he declared. Let the earth eat her. The first shovelful of dirt rained down, covering her knees. Her breath quickened, and she struggled against the ropes, but the pit was deep, and the earth was heavy. The villagers continued, each one throwing soil onto her body. Their faces showed no pity, only cold satisfaction. The girl screamed, her voice cracking in desperation. No, please, don't do this to me. I can still work, I can still fight. But no one listened. One by one, the voices rose in a chant, low and steady. It was not just a burial, it was a ritual, a punishment that erased the unwanted. Her cries grew weaker as dirt reached her chest. The cold soil pressed against her ribs, crushing her breath. Her glowing eyes darted from face to face, searching for mercy, but she found none, only stone-hearted stares. The moon climbed higher, silver light washing the cruel scene. The pit filled slowly, the girl's body vanishing under the weight of earth. Her tears mixed with soil, her lips whispering prayers no one heard. Her people turned away, their work done. The leader's voice echoed into the night. Let the silence of the ground claim her, as silence claimed her womb. They left her there, half buried, her face barely above the surface. The sound of their footsteps faded into the distance. Only the soft rustle of night air remained, and the faintest sound, a weak cry, broken and fading. Far away beyond the hills, a human traveler walked alone. He was weary from his long journey, a bag heavy on his back. The path through the alien forest was dark, branches clawing at his cloak. But something made him stop. He turned his head, listening. At first, he thought it was the wind, a strange whistle carried by the night. But then he heard it again, soft, desperate, almost swallowed by silence, a cry weak and pained like someone calling from underwater. He narrowed his eyes, gripping the lantern at his belt. Humans were not welcome here, and he knew the danger of wandering too close to alien villages. Yet the sound pulled at him, clawed at his chest, like a hand of sorrow. No wild beast made such a cry, no ghost called so desperately. It was the voice of someone still alive, someone fighting the darkness. The man stepped off the trail, moving through the thick brush. The lantern's glow revealed broken branches, trampled earth. And then, he saw it, a mound of fresh soil trembling slightly. A hand weakly broke through the dirt, fingers clawing at air. His heart stopped. There, in the shallow pit, was a face covered in dirt, eyes glowing faintly with terror. A girl, half buried, chest struggling. Against the weight of earth, her lips moved, whispering a soundless plea. Her tears left tiny rivers in the soil pressed against her cheeks. The man dropped his lantern, falling to his knees. Without a thought, he began digging with his bare hands, each handful of dirt tossed aside with frantic speed. His breath came fast, his fingers bleeding as stones cut into his skin, but he did not stop. The girl gasped, her eyes wide as they met his. For the first time that night, she saw something no one else had given her. Hope. The soil was heavy, but his arms were strong. He pulled at the ropes around her, loosening them, his fingers shaking. At last he freed her arms, and she clung weakly to him. Her voice trembled, barely audible. Why would you save me? The man looked down at her, his face shadowed by the lantern's glow. He had no answer yet. He only knew one thing. He could not walk away, not tonight, not ever. And as the moon shone over them, the silent burial was broken. But in its place, a new story began, one of life, of defiance, of a bond neither of them yet understood. The rescue. The girl's breathing was shallow, her chest rising and falling like a dying ember. The soil still clung to her skin, sticking to the faint glow of her tears. The human knelt beside her, his hands shaking with exhaustion, his nails blackened with dirt. For a moment, he simply stared at her, this fragile alien who had been buried alive by her own kind. Her lips moved again, whispering something weak and broken. He bent closer, his ear nearly touching her mouth. "Why, save me?" she asked again, her voice fading like smoke in the wind. Her glowing eyes blinked slowly, as if each second she fought the weight of death itself. The man took his flask from his belt and pressed it gently to her lips. At first she resisted, as though she no longer believed anything could save her. But then, her dry mouth parted and a few drops slid down her throat. She coughed, her body trembling violently, but her eyes widened slightly. Life stirred again, faint but real. "Drink," he whispered, his voice rough from silence. She drank more, each swallow ragged and painful, but the sound of water in her throat was the sound of survival. Her chest rose with a little more strength, and when she looked up at him again, her glowing eyes no longer held only fear. There was confusion too. He tore the last of the ropes from her wrists, his hands raw and bleeding. The fibers had cut deep into her skin, leaving red marks across her pale flesh. She flexed her fingers weakly, as though testing whether she was real. The man pulled off his cloak and wrapped it around her shaking frame. The warmth of cloth seemed to surprise her as much as his kindness. He slid one arm beneath her knees, another around her back. Her body was light, too light, as if starvation had hollowed her. She gasped at his touch, weakly pushing against his chest. "Don't," she whispered. "They will kill you. For helping me." The man did not answer, his jaw set with quiet resolve. He rose with her in his arms, his legs straining but steady. The night air was cold, carrying the fading echoes of the villagers' chants. He glanced back at the mound of earth, the pit half filled with dirt and cruelty, a place meant to erase her existence. But he would not leave her there. He walked quickly, his boots crunching against the forest floor. Branches whipped against his face, shadows shifted in the lantern's glow. Every sound made him glance over his shoulder. If the villagers returned, if they discovered her missing, they would track him, hunt him. But he pressed forward, his breath harsh in the silence. The girl lay against him, her head resting against his chest. Her glowing eyes stayed half open, staring up at the stars through the trees. It was as though she was afraid to close them, afraid if she slept, she would wake buried again. Her lips moved faintly, whispering words in her alien tongue. The man could not understand, but he felt the weight of her pain in every sound. After what felt like hours, his cabin came into view. A small, weathered structure hidden in the forest, built of rough wood and patched with metal. It stood like a forgotten relic in the wilderness. Smoke no longer rose from its chimney, its windows dark. It was a lonely place, but it was safe, and tonight it would become her only refuge. He pushed the door open with his shoulder, stepping inside. The cabin was silent, filled with the scent of old wood and ashes. He laid her gently on his cot, the cloak still wrapped around her. She clutched at it as though it was a shield against the world. Her chest rose and fell, stronger now but still fragile. The man lit the fireplace, tossing in dry logs until flames flickered and spread warmth through the room. The light revealed his face, tired eyes, lines of solitude carved deep into his skin. He turned back to her, seeing her staring at the flames as though she had never known such comfort. For a long moment, silence filled the cabin, broken only by the crackle of fire. Then her voice came, soft and unsure. You should not have done this." Her words trembled, not with anger, but with disbelief. "They left me to die, because I cannot give them children. And you, why would you risk yourself for one they call useless?" The man sat on a stool beside the fire, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. He did not answer immediately, his hands resting heavily on his knees. He could feel her eyes on him, searching for a reason. But the truth was simple, even if unspoken. Finally he looked at her, his voice steady but quiet. "Because you were still alive." The girl blinked, her glowing eyes filling with something she had not felt in a long time. Hope, fragile and uncertain. Her body trembled, but not from cold. She pulled the cloak tighter around herself and whispered, "They buried me in silence. But you gave me sound. They buried me in death. But you gave me breath." The man said nothing more, only rose and checked the door. The night outside was quiet, but danger still lingered. He knew the villagers would discover her missing by dawn. They would search, they would come, but he had already made his choice. As the firelight flickered across the cabin walls, the girl closed her eyes at last. not in fear, but in a fragile peace. Her breathing slowed, her chest rising and falling with a rhythm that spoke of life. The human sat watch, his hand resting on the rifle by his side. He had saved her once, and he would do it again if the night demanded it. Shelter of the lonely cabin. The storm broke over the forest before midnight. Thunder rolled across the hills, shaking the windows of the small cabin. Rain poured from the sky, turning the earth into mud and the branches into whips of shadow. Inside, the fire glowed warm, fighting back the chill that crept through the cracks in the walls. The alien girl lay curled on the cot, wrapped in the man's cloak. Her breathing had steadied, though each breath still rattled weakly in her chest. Her glowing eyes opened and closed as if she drifted between dream and memory. Every time she shut them, she saw again the circle of villagers, the shovels, the pit. Her body shivered, and she pulled the cloak tighter, as if it alone kept her from sinking back into the ground. The human sat near the fire, sharpening a blade by hand. The sound of stone on metal scraped softly, steady and patient. He kept glancing toward the door, listening to the howl of the storm outside, but he also looked at her, as though still unsure if she was real. For years his cabin had been silent, no voices, no footsteps but his own. And now, there she was, fragile, yet alive, something he had not expected to find in this cruel world. She shifted, her voice soft and raw. "Why, are you here? In this place?" Her words carried both curiosity and suspicion. She had been raised to see humans as strange outsiders, dangerous and unworthy of trust, yet this one had carried her from death into warmth. Her people had buried her. This stranger had dug her out. The man paused, his eyes on the blade. "I wanted to be alone," he answered simply. The firelight flickered across his face, showing no emotion, but in his voice was weight, a story he did not tell. The girl studied him, confused. Alone? He had chosen this silence while hers had been forced upon her. For a moment the storm outside seemed to grow louder, as though the world itself listened. She closed her eyes, whispering almost to herself. "I was not even given that choice. They buried me for what I could not do, and you..." Her voice broke. "You gave me water. You gave me fire. I don't understand." The man set the blade aside, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "You don't have to understand tonight," he said. "Rest. Gather your strength. Tomorrow, we will see." His words should have comforted her, but before her mind could settle, she heard something. A sound beyond the storm. At first faint, then sharper, cutting through the rain. Voices, distant but real. They carried across the forest like the call of hunters. Her body tensed, her glowing eyes widening. She sat up suddenly, gripping the edge of the cot. "They're looking," she whispered. "They will not stop until they find me." The human's head turned sharply toward the window. He, too, had heard the voices, muffled shouts rising and falling in the storm. He stood, moving quickly to the corner of the room. There, hidden beneath loose boards, was a cellar door. He pulled it open, revealing a narrow, dark space below. "Go," he said firmly. The girl froze, fear and hesitation battling in. Her heart, her people had betrayed her, buried her. Yet the thought of hiding away again made her chest ache. Still, the fire in his voice left no room for argument. He helped her down into the cellar, the wooden ladder creaking under her light frame. The darkness closed around her, the only light a thin strip from the boards above. He replaced the boards, grabbed his rifle, and moved to the door, his hand pressed against the wood, feeling the thrum of rain and the nearness of danger. The voices came closer, torches glowing faintly beyond the trees. The hunters were searching, and they were not far. Inside the cellar, the girl hugged herself, her heart racing. The earth smell of the hidden space pressed against her senses. It felt too much like the pit, too much like the soil that had nearly swallowed her. Her breath came quick, panic rising, but then she remembered the human's face, the way he had dug with bleeding hands, the way he had said simply, "Because you were still alive." She clung to that memory, forcing herself to stay still. The man opened the door when the knock came. 3 figures stood in the rain, cloaks heavy, torches hissing. One step forward, eyes narrow. "Stranger, we search for one who was meant to be taken by the ground." His voice was sharp, his tone accusing. "Have you seen her? A girl with glowing eyes?" The human stood firm, the rifle in his hand but lowered. His eyes were cold, unreadable. "No one comes here," he said, his voice steady. "Only the storm and me." The hunter's eyes studied him, suspicion burning in the silence. One of them glanced at the ground, noticing the faint trail of disturbed soil leading toward the cabin. He opened his mouth to speak, but a sudden crack of thunder shook the sky, lightning splitting the night. For a moment all faces turned upward, blinded by the flash. The hunters muttered, uneasy, as though the storm itself warned them away. Finally the leader spat to the side. If she still walks, she won't live long. If we find her near you, stranger, your fate will be the same as hers. With that they turned, their torches vanishing slowly into the trees. The storm swallowed their footsteps, leaving only rain. The man closed the door quietly, his chest tight with tension. He walked back to the boards, pulling them aside. The girl climbed out slowly, her body shaking from fear, from memory. Her eyes met his, filled with both terror and wonder. "You lied for me," she whispered. "You risked death for me." The man looked at her, his face unreadable. "I told you," he said quietly. "You don't have to understand tonight." And as the storm raged on outside, the cabin held its fragile secret. Two outcasts bound together by silence, danger, and something neither yet dared to name. The hunter's return. The storm ended by dawn. The sky was gray, dripping with mist, and the forest dripped steadily as if the rain had not truly stopped. The human stood outside his cabin, leaning on his rifle, his tired eyes scanning the tree line. The night had been long, and though the hunters had left, he knew it was not over. Men who buried the weak did not stop until they were sure of death. Inside, the alien girl sat near the fire, her hands pressed around a steaming cup of water. Her glowing eyes flickered like small lanterns in the dim cabin. She stared at the flames, lost in thought. The warmth of the fire could not drive away the cold memory of soil pressing against her chest. Every time she blinked, she felt it again. The crushing silence, the heavy earth, the laughter of her people. The door opened, and the human stepped inside. He placed his rifle against the wall, shaking droplets from his cloak. "They will come back," he said simply. His voice was calm, but the weight behind it was heavy. The girl's fingers tightened. "Ed on her cup. They will not forgive," she whispered. "They will tear apart the forest if they must. They will find me." The man crouched near the fire, placing more wood into the flames. "They can search," he said, "but this is my home, and I don't let anyone take what I protect." She looked at him, her glowing eyes widening slightly. Protect? No one had ever used such a word for her. Her people had seen her only as a failure, as a shame, and yet the stranger spoke as though she had value, as though she deserved to live. Before she could answer, a sound outside froze her blood. Voices, closer this time, the crunch of heavy boots through wet earth, the clatter of weapons carried with cruel purpose. The hunters had returned, and they were not alone. This time, it sounded like many feet, an entire search party. The human rose, his jaw tightening. He moved to the cellar door again, pulling it open. The girl shook her head fiercely. "No, not again. I can't breathe in there." Her voice trembled, panic in every word. The memory of being buried alive was too raw, too sharp. The dark cellar was too much like the pit. He paused, his eyes meeting hers. For a long second, neither spoke. Then he nodded once, closing the boards. "Stay behind me," he said. Her heart pounded, but she stood, clutching his cloak around her shoulders. The knock came, hard and loud against the wooden door. The man opened it slowly, revealing a line of hunters standing in the mist. Their eyes glowed with suspicion, their weapons glistening with rain. The leader stepped forward, the same one from the night before. His cloak hung heavy, his face grim. "You," he growled. "We followed the trail and the earth told us truth. Someone dug her out, and we think it was you." The human stood tall, his broad frame filling the doorway. His rifle rested casually in his hands, though his grip was firm. "I told you last night," he said evenly. "No one comes here." The hunter's eyes narrowed, their hands tightening on blades and spears, but then one of them leaned to the side, his gaze catching the faint glow inside the cabin. The firelight flickered against her eyes, her unmistakable glowing eyes. The girl froze, her breath catching. It was only for a second, but it was enough. The hunter sneered. "She's here," he spat. "I saw her. You hide her, human." The cabin filled with silence, the air thick with danger. The man did not move, his face a mask of calm. "She's mine now," he said, his voice low but steady. "You buried her once. You won't touch her again." The hunters bristled, anger flashing in their eyes. "You defy our law for a useless one?" the leader roared. "She is nothing. She is ash in the making." But the human's stance did not waver. His finger hovered near the trigger, his eyes burning with quiet fire. "She is not nothing," he said. "She breathes, she bleeds. That makes her more than any grave you've dug." The girl's heart raced, her hands shaking as she clutched the cloak tighter. No one had ever spoken for her, not even herself. And now this stranger stood between her and death as though it was the most natural thing in the world. The hunters shifted, muttering, some unsure, but the leader snarled, stepping forward. "If you stand with her, you stand against us, and the ground will take you too." The human raised his rifle, steady and sure. "Then let the ground try," he said coldly. The click of his weapon echoed through the mist. The hunters froze, measuring the man's resolve. They saw no fear in his eyes. Oh, the promise of a fight they might not survive. Finally, the leader spat on the ground. "This is not finished," he growled. "We will return, and when we do, your fire will not save you." They turned, their boots squelching in the wet soil, disappearing into the fog of trees. The girl exhaled shakily, her body trembling from the storm of fear inside her chest. The man closed the door slowly, setting the bar across it. He turned to her, his face calm, but his voice softer now. "They'll be back, but they won't have you." Her glowing eyes filled with tears she could not hold back. She whispered, broken but clear, "No one ever stood for me. No one. Until you." The fire crackled in the silence, and though danger still lurked in the forest, inside the lonely cabin, something new had begun. A bond stronger than law, stronger than fear, a bond the hunters could not bury, the secret revealed. The night grew long again. The storm had passed, but the forest carried an uneasy silence. No wolves howled, no owls called, only the crackle of fire in the lonely cabin. The hunters had left, but their threats hung heavy in the air, like smoke that refused to fade. The alien girl sat close to the fire, her knees pulled to her chest. Her glowing eyes reflected the flames, shimmering with fear and memory. The human sat nearby, silent, his rifle resting against the wall. He sharpened a knife with steady strokes, though his mind was far away. The tension of the day had not left him, and he knew danger would return. For a long while, neither spoke. The fire popped, sending sparks into the dark room. At last, the girl's voice broke the silence, soft but trembling. "Do you want to know why they buried me?" The man's hand stilled on the blade, his tired eyes lifting toward her. She stared at the floor, unable to meet his gaze. Her voice cracked as she continued. "In my people, a woman is measured only by what she can give, by the children she can bring, the blood she can add to the clan. But I—" Her breath shook. "I cannot. The healers said I was sterile, useless, they said cursed, and for that, they put me in the ground." Her shoulders trembled, tears running down her dirt-streaked face. The words cut her even as she spoke them. "I tried to serve in other ways. I trained. I fought. I worked harder than all of them. But it never mattered. They looked at me and saw nothing. And so they buried me alive to erase the shame." Her voice fell to a whisper. "They told me I was less than dust." The human's jaw tightened, his fingers curling around the knife handle. He had known cruelty before. He had seen men kill for power, for greed, for nothing. But to bury someone simply for being unable to bear life. It twisted something inside him, something dark and angry. He set the knife aside, leaning forward. "They were wrong," he said firmly, his voice low but steady. "They buried you because they are cowards, because they needed someone to blame for their emptiness. That doesn't make you nothing." Her glowing eyes lifted slowly, wide with disbelief. "You don't understand," she whispered. "In my world, a woman who cannot give children is worse than dead. No man will claim her, no clan will keep her. I was not just unwanted, I was poison." The human held her gaze, his voice stronger now. "Then your world is blind. I don't care what laws they made. You breathe, you fight, you endure. That makes you more alive than any of them." Her lips parted, but no words came. No one had ever spoken for her like this. Her people had named her failure. But this stranger, this human, called her alive. Tears spilled again, though this time they were different, not just of pain but of something fragile, something she dared not call hope. The man leaned back, his eyes distant now. "You asked me before why I live alone," he said. The firelight flickered across his face, casting deep shadows. "I was betrayed too, not by strangers, by my own kind." The girl watched him, her glowing eyes fixed on his every word. He continued, his voice rough. I fought in their wars. I bled for them. And when I was broken, when I could no longer serve as they wanted, they cast me aside. Not buried, no, but exile can feel like the same grave. For a moment, silence filled the cabin, broken only by the fire. Two exiles, two castaways from different worlds, sat together under the same roof. She whispered softly, "You are like me." He nodded once, his eyes on the flames. "Maybe that's why I couldn't leave you there." Her chest tightened, her breath caught. For the first time, she felt less alone in her pain. She leaned closer to the fire, the warmth chasing away her shivers. Slowly, she whispered, "Do you regret it? Saving me?" His gaze met hers, steady and unshaken. "No," he said simply. Her glowing eyes widened, searching for any crack of doubt, but his face told only truth. The fire burned low, shadows stretching across the cabin. She rested her head lightly against the cloak he had given her. Her voice was barely audible as she whispered, "They gave me death, but you gave me a chance. I don't know why, but thank you." The human turned his face away, staring into the dying fire. He said nothing more, but in the silence, a bond was forged stronger than words. A bond made of shared wounds, shared loneliness, and the fragile beginnings of trust. Outside, the forest lay dark and waiting. The hunters would return. The threat had not passed, but inside the lonely cabin, two broken lives had found each other, and together, they carried secrets that could no longer be buried. The bond. Morning came slowly. The mist clung to the forest like a heavy blanket, and the cabin smelled of smoke and damp earth. The human stepped outside, his boots sinking slightly in the wet soil, his eyes scanning the trees. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle in the undergrowth a possible threat. The hunters had promised to return, and he knew they would. Inside, the alien girl stirred awake, her glowing eyes dim from exhaustion, but calmer than before. She sat up on the cot, wrapping his cloak around her shoulders. Her body still weak, but the fire in her heart had grown stronger. She listened to the soft thud of his steps outside, and for the first time in her life, she wondered what it meant to be safe. When he came back in, his hair damp with morning mist, she looked at him quietly. "You should have left me," she whispered, though there was no conviction in her words. He set down his rifle and gave her a steady look. "I don't leave the living to die," he said simply. His tone was calm, but it carried a truth she could feel deep in her bones. The girl lowered her gaze, her hands tightening on the cloak. "No one ever said that to me before. Not my people, not anyone." Her voice cracked. "They told me I was less than nothing, and now you stand for me as if I matter." The man sat near the fire, tossing a log into the fading embers. "You matter," he said without hesitation. "Because you're still here, still breathing, still fighting. They can bury you in dirt, but they can't bury your spirit unless you let them." Her glowing eyes widened, and for the first time she let herself truly look at him. This human was not like her people, not like anyone she had known. He carried his own scars, his own exile, but he chose to protect her despite it. Slowly, she moved closer, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. She sat near him by the fire, her shoulder brushing against his arm. The warmth of his presence filled her chest with something she had never felt. Belonging. "Why do you live alone?" she asked softly. His gaze stayed on the flames, but his voice was distant. "I was betrayed once. I gave everything, blood, sweat, years of my life, and when I had nothing left to give, they cast me aside, alone. I decided it was better to vanish than to beg." Her chest tightened. She whispered, "Like me." He turned his head, their eyes meeting in the firelight. "Yes," he said, his voice softer, "like you." Silence stretched, but it was no longer the silence of strangers. It was the silence of two souls recognizing each other. She reached out hesitantly, her small hand resting against his rough, scarred one. Her fingers trembled, but she did not pull away. "Then," she whispered, "can I stay? Here, with you?" His hand shifted, slowly turning to grip hers gently. He did not speak at once, but the weight of his touch said what his words could not. At last, he nodded, his voice low. "You can stay, but you must know, the hunters will come back. It won't be easy." She shook her head, her glowing eyes fierce. "I don't care. I would rather die beside someone who saw me than live among those who buried me." Her words struck deep, and for the first time in years, the man felt the stir of something he had thought long dead. Not just duty, not just survival, but connection. The fire crackled as the bond between them grew stronger, not forged by choice, but by pain, by survival, by defiance. Two outcasts standing against a world that wanted them gone. But then, footsteps sounded outside, soft at first, then clearer, breaking the fragile moment. The girl's body stiffened, fear flashing in her glowing eyes. The human rose quickly, his hand on his rifle. He motioned for her to stay behind him, his face sharp with focus. The footsteps grew closer, crunching on wet leaves. A shadow passed by the window, pausing as though listening. The girl's heart raced, her breath caught in her throat. She whispered, "They found us." The man shook his head slowly, his finger near the trigger. "Not yet," he murmured. "Stay quiet." The shadow moved on, vanishing into the mist. The sound of steps faded slowly into the forest, but the warning was clear. The hunters were circling, waiting for their chance. The girl clutched his cloak tightly, her voice trembling but strong. "They won't stop. They'll never forgive. You should let me go. If they kill me, maybe they'll leave you alone." He turned sharply, his voice cutting through her fear. "No, I didn't dig you out of the ground just to watch you crawl back into it. If they want you, they'll have to go through me." Her breath caught, tears rising in her glowing eyes. She whispered, broken and amazed, "No one ever said that for me. No one ever chose me, until you." The silence in the cabin filled again, but this time, it was not silence of despair. It was the silence of a bond sealed in fire and awe. And you're a promise unspoken but stronger than any vow. Outside, the hunters moved like shadows in the mist, but inside, two exiles sat close to the fire, hands still joined, hearts still beating, and in that fragile warmth, a bond was born that no burial could destroy. The choice, the morning mist never fully lifted. It clung to the forest like a ghost, heavy and restless. The human stood at the cabin door, rifle in hand, his eyes narrowed toward the trees. He knew they were out there, waiting. The hunters never forgot, and today, they would return. Inside, the alien girl sat near the fire, her glowing eyes wide with fear, her fingers twisted in the cloak he had given her, her heart pounding too fast. Every sound outside, the crack of branches, the hiss of wind, made her flinch. But when she looked at him, standing steady with his weapon, her chest calmed. No one had ever stood between her and death, and yet this human did, as though it was the simplest truth in the world. The silence broke with the sound of voices, deep, commanding, moving closer. The hunters had come, and this time there were many. The man tightened his grip on the rifle, his jaw hardening. He turned to her and said quietly, "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." She shook her head, tears burning in her glowing eyes. "They'll kill you," she whispered. "They'll cut you down just as they tried to bury me." His gaze softened, but his voice stayed strong. "Better to fall standing than to live crawling. I won't give you back to them." The pounding came on the door, shaking the wood. The leader's voice roared, "Human, you hide what belongs to us. Give her, or the ground will drink your blood as well." The girl's breath caught, her body trembling. She clung to his sleeve, whispering, "Don't fight for me, please. I'm not worth it." His eyes flashed, sharp and unyielding. "You are," he said, his voice cold, "adding like steel. You are worth every drop of blood I have left." He threw open the door, rifle raised. The hunters stood in the mist, weapons drawn, torches burning. Their leader stepped forward, sneering, "Move aside, human, this is not your fight." But the man stood tall, blocking the doorway with his broad frame. "She's mine now," he said coldly. "You buried her once, you won't touch her again." The hunters snarled, their voices rising. One shouted, "You break our law." Another hissed, "You defend the cursed." The leader raised his hand, his voice thundering, "Then you shall share her grave." They surged forward, weapons gleaming. The man fired, the crack of his rifle tearing through the mist. One hunter fell, the others froze. The human's voice thundered above the silence. "Step closer, and the next will fall too." For a moment, the hunters wavered. They had expected fear, weakness, surrender. Instead, they faced defiance like iron. The leader snarled, his eyes narrowing. "You cannot fight us all," he spat. "You will die for her, and she will still end in the dirt." Before the man could answer, the girl stepped forward, her glowing eyes blazing brighter than ever. "No!" she cried, her voice breaking but strong. "You buried me because I could not give you children. You named me useless, cursed. But look at me. I live, I breathe, and he sees me when you never did." The hunters muttered, uneasy. The sight of her alive, standing with fire in her voice, unsettled them. The leader raised his hand to silence them, his face twisted with rage. "Silence," he roared. "You are nothing." But the human stepped forward, his rifle steady. "Then she is nothing beside me, and I'll kill every one of you before I let you touch her again." The hunters shifted, doubt flickering in their eyes. They had expected a broken girl and a weak man. Instead, they faced two souls who refused to bow. The leader hissed in fury, but he saw the truth. This fight would cost more than they could afford. Finally, he spat on the ground, his voice low and bitter. "Keep your cursed one, human, but know this, your days are numbered. When the storm breaks again, you both will be swallowed." He turned sharply, and the hunters followed, vanishing into the mist. The cabin door closed with a heavy thud. The man lowered his rifle, his shoulders tense. The girl stood frozen, her chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. Then suddenly, she sank to her knees, tears spilling down her cheeks. You chose me," she whispered. "You faced them all, and you still chose me." The man knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "I told you," he said softly. "You don't have to understand, but you are not nothing, not while I still stand." She looked up at him, her glowing eyes shimmering with tears and something more. A fragile spark of hope, of belonging. She whispered, "They buried me in death, but you gave me life." And for the first time she smiled, small but real. The fire inside the cabin burned brighter, chasing away the mist outside. Two exiles, two broken souls, but no longer alone. Together, they had chosen defiance. Together, they had chosen life.